So thank you for having me. It's really good to be here. And yeah, I'm an urban forester by trade, and that's all about working with trees and people. And that's been a very interesting journey for me personally because I originally got into forestry to get away from people, and that's difficult. So here I am today. But it's been a good journey. And one of the first things I want to talk about is the urban forest, because to some people that's an oxymoron. How can an area be both urban and how can it be forest? Well, actually, if you look at some of the cities in the States, like Annapolis or Milwaukee, they've got kind of around 40% tree cover over there, which is way above the averages for the UK and also a little bit above the averages for Europe as well. And trees in the urban environment are really important because that's where most of us live, so it's where they have the biggest effect, it's where they give us most benefit and where they have most value. And as a species, we haven't been urbanised very long, and so towns and cities are actually quite stressful places for us, and trees help mitigate for that in a whole variety of ways. But in order to achieve that, we do need that canopy cover. This slide here shows the average canopy cover for towns. I know it's expressed regionally, but this is from the Trees in Towns 2 survey that was carried out in 2005, and you can see our canopy cover averages are actually a bit below those that are experienced in Europe and in the States. I'm going to go on to say London is actually a bit of an exception, and one of the reasons for that is because it got so bad in the past. So the Victorians recognised that actually something needed to be done, and the Edwardians as well, and they embarked upon quite a large tree planting scheme in London at that time, and London's benefiting from that legacy now. So the canopy cover figures for London are around 21-22%. Different studies carried out that have found slightly different results, but it's in that ballpark of 20%. The Victorians knew that this was a good thing. Trees improved air quality by raking that air pollution from the air. They capture it on the fine hairs on the underside of the leaves, they capture it on the bark, and that stops it getting into our lungs. And as part of that iTree eco study that Peter mentioned, we're able to measure that, which obviously the Victorians didn't have the luxury of. We could break that down tree species by tree species, but here we're looking at the pollutants month by month and broken down pollutant by pollutant. Now, because it's been raked out of the atmosphere, that then doesn't go on to damage us as people or buildings, and that's a service worth £126 million every single year, because if the trees weren't taking it out of the system, we'd end up in hospital, buildings would need repairing, and that's using the UK social damage cost, which is a recognised UK government figure for air pollution. So we're going to rattle through some of the other tree benefits as well, because the great thing about trees is they do all these benefits all at the same time and at very little cost. And you won't be able to read all of those, but I'll go through some of them now, and we won't be able to cover them all. So, air temperature regulation. So this is some work we did in London, Victoria with Forest Research. A lot of our work is collaborative, big projects. No one's got the entire skill set. And so in this work, they found that the trees around London, Victoria Business Improvement District, those particularly in the backyard of Buckingham Palace, were reducing peak summer temperatures by 7 degrees centigrade, which is quite a staggering amount. Also, that effect could be felt up to a kilometre away, but then though that reduction in temperature was a lot less, around a degree or under. But it's still a significant thing. In the recent heat wave incidents in Paris in the early 2000s, you know, that contributed to quite a few deaths directly related to that. More locally, trees have been shown to increase the life of asphalt by around 15%, and also the way that trees can cool the air also can contribute to energy saving effects on buildings. Now, they're a lot more advanced in the US with this kind of research, but we did make a start on this work with the London project. So if you have trees around a building, you can reduce your air conditioning costs in the summer through the trees cooling the building, and also in the winter you can reduce heating costs. But the trick is to get the trees in the right place. And so these are the figures we have for London. The actual benefit is quite small overall, but it is a benefit, and that's because trees can be a disbenefit too if they're planted in the wrong place. You need to put the right tree in the right place. So when we look at buildings, it's really important to think about which aspect the tree's put on, which species of tree you use. Because if you put it in the wrong place, you could increase your heating bills and you could increase your air conditioning bills. Apologies for the quality of that. Shoppers in high streets, you'll often hear shopkeepers complaining about that trees can sometimes, mask their hoardings so that people don't know what shop they're going into. Well, actually, the research shows that shoppers spend longer in leafier high streets. There's anecdotal evidence to suggest that the effects of the recession have been worse in high streets with less tree cover. Shoppers are willing to spend 9% to 12% more for goods in leafier high streets, the research shows. And I'll give a link to where all this research is at the end of the talk. We did some work with in High Wycombe, and this is around property values. So another thing trees can do is increase property values, and what this is showing is a relationship, not a causation. So these benefits, some we can measure quite accurately, some we've got a bit more work to do, with others, of course, internationally doing that work to drill down into the figures. But it's still quite a stark difference between property values realised with areas less than 25% tree cover and in the areas where there's 25% more tree cover. It's quite an old study now, done by Roger Ulrich in 1984, but he demonstrated that should you be unlucky enough to end up in hospital, a view of trees and green space from your hospital bed can increase your recovery times. I don't know if there's anything in this, but these guys did not have the benefit of such a view, and they were in hospital from 1979 right up until 1982. Taking that concept one step further, in Toronto, they mapped their entire tree canopy cover, and they overlaid that with all their health data to see what the results might be. Apologies for this slide, you don't have to read it all. I'll summarise. 10 more trees in a city block were roughly equivalent to living 7 years longer. And what's interesting about this study, again, it's a relationship, not a causation, but just increasing that to 11 trees per city block actually doubled that effect. So it was equivalent to be living 14 years longer or having an annual income of around $20,000. Trees have also been shown to reduce crime, which is contrary to popular belief. I know there is a perception that trees can increase crime in poorly managed green space areas. But actually, in this study, a 10% increase in trees roughly equated to a 12% decrease in crime. And that represents a saving to police departments and things like that. And it's really quite a striking relationship. But there is a catch here, and that's about properly maintaining your trees. So in Torbay, we're able to look at all the costs associated with trees, the planting costs, the salaries for the tree officers, the leaf clearance, the installation costs, the end-of-life removal costs, and all the stuff in between. But we could only really value, in monetary terms, around two of the benefits at that time: the air pollution removal and the carbon sequestration. Now, if you look at CICES, which is the International Classification for Ecosystem Services, there are around 30 that can relate to trees and woodlands, around 15 that are also relevant to the urban area, around 7 that we can quantify the effect, as in the drop in summer temperatures or the tonnage of air pollution removed, and there's only about 3 or 4 we can monetize. So with that in mind, we took all those figures together, and for every £1 spent on this rather sorry looking cherry tree in a grass verge, it only returned 1 pence back in benefits. That's not a good investment. Another point, actually, is one of my bugbears is, a lot of money's been invested in planting this tree, and then actually they've paid contractors to go out and kill it. They're paying them to do this. It's insanity. However, at the other end of the spectrum, and for this study we looked at a few different trees. This is the worst and the best. And we worked with the economist at Natural England, Tim Sunderland. For every £1 spent on that oak tree there, it's got more space, admittedly, but it's got a fuller crown. For every £1 spent on that tree, it's returning £4.96 in benefits. And that's just looking at the air pollution removal and the carbon sequestration. So the key is really to look after your trees and increase that canopy cover, because we don't really want to settle, I don't think, for sort of 10 or 15%. It would be really good to get up to 30, 40% canopy cover to really actualise and realise those benefits and values that trees are providing. So thank you very much for your time. If you want to get information on getting trees into hard landscapes, then I suggest you look at the work of TDAG, the Trees Design Action Group. They've got 2 excellent documents at the moment: Trees in the Townscape, which is top-down, looking at trees and how to integrate them into our towns and cities, and also Trees in Hard Landscapes, which is more bottom-up, the nitty-gritty, how to get the tree into those hard spaces, because it is possible, but it takes a bit more time and effort, but it's worth it if we look at trees in the long run. All the research I've been talking about, international, has been collated by Dr. Kathleen Wolfe, and this is her website here, where it's all been put together very nicely under different themes. That's me done. Thank you very much for your time.